Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm Karen E. Osborne, author of Getting It Right and my upcoming novel, Tangled Lies, which comes out on July 22nd. And I hope you've been following the series because we have met so many amazing writers, like we're going to meet today. And we've had so many great recommendations of books. My list of books that I need to read keeps getting longer and longer, but I've been enjoying many of the books that have been recommended. And if you've got a book club, be sure to show them one of the episodes that you liked, because some of the books might be perfect for your book club. And today is definitely a book club kind of book that we're going to talk about today with author Mark James Miller. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Karen, how are you?
I am great, and I'm so glad to be with you today. I'm just going to read one of the many wonderful reviews that Mark has already received for his latest book, and then we'll talk about his writing journey and some of the other things that he's written, and he'll tell you all about himself. But let me just read this to you. So he is an author and a columnist and a teacher, Mark James Miller. And his latest novel is called White Cockade. Is that how you
The
pronounce
White Cockade. Yeah, the White
it?
Cockade.
The White Cockade, which chronicles the first, this is what one reviewer said, it chronicles the first uncertain steps of the American Revolution with an enviable balance of history, art, character, and plot. Settle into an armchair and prepare for a good old-fashioned page turner, says author Brian Kaufman. So that sounds like a pretty exciting book. But before we get into that, do you have a recommendation for our audience about a book that you might like them to consider reading?
Yeah, I just finished reading. It's considered a classic, and I've wanted to read it since college, but I never did. It's called "And Quiet Flows the Dawn" by Mikhail Sholokhov. Originally written in Russian, and of course translated into English.
Mhm.
It's a great historical novel of the Don Cossacks in the time of the World War I and the Russian Revolution.
Ah, is that a particular interest of yours?
Yes, yes. Well, history is, I love history, and European history has always fascinated me, as well as American history.
Yeah, cool. And your book is a kind of a combination of both in a way, since it's the American Revolution.
Right.
And do you have another one?
Yes, I do. This is another, I think, forgotten classic, but it's called Three Cities, and it's by an author called Sholem, Sholom, Asch, Asch. And it's set in that same time period, pre-World War I, and then up through the Russian Revolution. And the three cities it's referring to are Warsaw, St. Petersburg, and Moscow.
Hmm. And so it's suspense. It's a historical novel
It's
with
a historical novel, and it's about, well, as good historical novels always are, it's about people caught up in forces beyond their control.
yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
the Russian World War I, Russian Revolution, or American Revolution, people caught up in that. That's what I've always loved, stories like that. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah. So tell us about your latest novel.
Okay. Um, White Cockade, I probably better back up a little bit, but I started working on it after Red Tide was published in 2015. And I toyed with several ideas and I settled on this story of the American Revolution. And so I sketched it out from start to finish and began working on it. I had to do a ton of research, as you can imagine. In fact, I could show you like a stack of notes that I took, really, literally about that big, and learned a lot about the American Revolution that I didn't know before. But at any rate, I started working on it, and I finished it more or less at the end of 2019. And I realized it was so long, I had two books here. So I cut it, basically found a place I could cut it more or less in half. And that involved a lot of rewriting. And then I sent the first half to Reagan at Black Rose Writing. And he got back to me and said, we like it, but it's still too long. So cut it down some more. So that took me a little while. The pandemic hit right about then. And for a teacher, that involved learning a whole new way of teaching on Zoom.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of time. And then also, again, I'm president of my teachers union. So um, I had to do a lot of negotiating and so forth. So it took me longer than I wished to get that back to him. But I got it back to him in like December of 2020. And then he right away emailed me back with a contract offer. So that made me very happy. But the White Cockade begins in early in 1775, and it takes place mostly in Boston. And as the tensions are rising, my protagonist, Josiah Hartford is his name, comes from a wealthy family, shipbuilding family. He's just come back home from Harvard and gotten his degree in philosophy there. And he's a classic case of, I'm not going to get involved in this. I don't like war, and I'm just not going to get involved. And so, but as he sees that, it started to catch up with him, whether he likes it or not. And he sees British soldiers mistreating American civilians. He even intervenes once when a British soldier is trying to attack an American woman. He throws the guy to the ground. And so he's again caught up more and more in this. And his youngest brother, Patrick, is 16 years old. He's what we would call autistic, although in those days they called him a savant. He could, he could memorize. You tell him what day of the, when you were born, he can tell you what day of the week that was like that. You ask him like, what's 22 times 50, he can tell you the answer like that, but he lives in his own little world. And so he's visiting friends in Concord. And then Josiah gets word on the fateful day, April 18th, 1775. The British are getting ready to march, and they're going to march in the countryside, and Concord is their target. They're going to burn the village down, and they're looking for weapons that the militias have been storing in the countryside, getting ready for a war with the British. So he realizes, the whole family realizes that if that happens, Patrick will they don't know what will happen to him. He might just wander off in the woods and die. Can't find his way back home, doesn't know where he is. So Josiah said, I'm going to ride to Concord to get him out of there before the British do. So he rides out like at midnight out of Boston. He evades the British patrols and roadblocks, but he stops at Lexington, which was where it's about 6 miles this side of Concord, and rests his horse. And he witnesses the first shots of the American Revolution fired there at Concord. And so he stays to help with the wounded. But because of that, he's late getting to Concord. And by now it's too late. And he witnesses the British kill his brother.
Oh.
So he,
and you're not giving us too much. You're not giving too much away, are you?
That's really about it right there. Because now he's involved whether he likes it or not. And he ends up joining one of the militia companies. He's in constant turmoil. He can't get back home. Boston's under siege. So, and to complicate things, to give him a little bit more to think about, he's been carrying on an affair with the maid. And so when he leaves that night, she tells him that she's pregnant. So he's got that on his mind as well, what's happening. And so he can't get home again for almost a year. And maybe I should stop there.
Yes, you've got us all intrigued. It sounds like a great story and a great read. Now, you mentioned Red Tide. So Red Tide is a very different kind of book?
Very different, yeah. Red Tide is more or less autobiographical. I guess everybody has to get that out of their system. So Red Tide takes place in 1968, 1969 in a small town on the West Coast. And the basic story there is these two friends, two surfing buddies, accidentally witness a murder by a gang like a Manson-like family.
Wow.
And so they're totally freaked out, don't know what to do. One of them says we should go and tell, because they murdered, the guy that they murder is the town drunk, so nobody really cares about it too much. And so they decide, if we tell on these guys, they might kill us, or their disciples might kill us. So they're going to keep it to themselves. And their lives spiral out of control. And eventually, and especially the narrator, Pete, has a very dysfunctional home life. And so they eventually decide to run away. And they run away to a commune in Laguna Beach for a while, and then they end up going to Cabo San Lucas at the tip end of Baja. And their consciences are all the time bothering them. They finally decide we've got to go back and tell what we know. So I probably should stop there as well.
Yes. That also sounds like a very cool book. So I have one last writing question. When did you start writing? Did you start when you were a kid? Did you always know this is what you were going to do?
Yeah, basically, yes. I remember in third grade, I was writing stories and essays and so forth. But I never really got into it that much. I did get high praise for my writing skills in college. And then in the 80s, I started writing articles and short stories. And but it wasn't really until the 2000s that I really started thinking of it as a vocation. Um, I
Mm,
started I started winning awards for things that I wrote for both the American Federation of Teachers and the California Federation of Teachers for publications that they do.
mm,
And that encouraged me. I mean, I'm up against probably some pretty smart people. So I
yeah.
started winning first place, especially from the American Federation, because there's like 1.7 million members there. So um,
Yes,
and
that was an accomplishment. Absolutely.
it got to where I was winning this every year. And then I started in 2012, I started writing a column for our local newspaper, the Santa Maria Times, like I said. And then 2015, Red Tide got published. And then in 2017, I started another column with the same newspaper. It's actually published in 3 or 4 newspapers. And it's called Central Coast Past, Present, Future. And so I write about where I live is called the Central Coast of California,
Mhm.
from basically um, the end of Los Angeles up through about Monterey. And so I write about interesting things going on, historical things. Like most people don't know that in 1942, a Japanese submarine surfaced and shelled an oil field in Santa Barbara.
Hmm.
Also, yeah, people don't know that once there was a prison camp for German prisoners in Santa Barbara. And there's some interesting stories there as well. I'd like to tell one just quickly.
Well,
Um,
okay.
Okay, yeah, I'll be quick, but this one I love, and I think you will too, because the story is that the German prisoners were being told to help harvest crops, and a Hispanic ranch hand came and was going to instruct them on it. So this one Nazi guy says, "I'm not going to be instructed by a brown man. Don't even, I won't do it." So they broke for lunch, and the Hispanic man starts heating up some burritos for lunch. And this Nazi had never smelled anything like that before, and he came nearby, and what's that? So the ranch hand gave him one, and he ate it and liked it, and they became friends after that. So one little friendly gesture erased a whole lifetime of prejudice.
And over food. Over
Yeah,
food, right?
yes,
Breaking bread is
yeah,
always a good thing.
yeah.
If our listeners, watchers wanted to find out more about you and look for you online, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, you touched my conscience. I should do more with my website. So that's
Mm.
www.historyenglishwriting.com. And then I'm also on Twitter, Mythic Master at Twitter, and then I'm also on Facebook, Mark James Miller on Facebook.
All
And
right.
yeah, so I should catch up to the 21st century and get on Instagram as well, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah, me too. I'm on Instagram, but not in any meaningful way, but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you for listening in today. I hope you are intrigued by these 2 books that we've heard about today, and I know you've now seen the beautiful cover and must very much want to read more. I know I'm going to. Thank you so much for joining us today. And until next time, remember, send us, what are you reading? What are you writing? I'd like to know.